everybody. I'm Gwen Campbell-Mindes, and welcome to Gwen's Bookish Ramblings. Today, we're not going to be coy, or I'm not going to be coy. What is this we? There is no we, there is me, alone with my friends rabbits. And we'll be talking about Dave Barry's Big Trouble. I've already done a book by Dave Barry, which was his guide to guys. Dave Barry was, possibly still is, fairly prolific as a writer, and I'm not just talking about the compilations that he put out of various articles that he did. I'm talking about, among other things, his books that were actual books, and in this case, his very first novel. That's why it is subtitled An Actual Novel by Dave Barry. And as you can see, it was, at the time of the printing of this particular edition of the book, soon to be a major motion picture. I don't recall hearing anything about this major motion picture. I don't think any of you do either. Despite the fact that this was a Barry Sonnenfeld film starring Tim Allen, Omar Epps, Dennis Farina, Ben Foster, Janine Garofalo, Jason Lee, Rene Russo, Tom Sizemore, Stanley Tucci. And I'm just reading off of the back for that. So if anybody remembers this, good for you. You can commentate to yourself or others about whether or not the movie was any good. Down in the bottom left corner of the picture, I will move the mouse over here. You can see, as I circle it, the enemy frog. I'm very sad Roger the dog isn't on this cover, because really, Roger the dog is... well, he's got more of a stage presence than the enemy toad, but what are you going to do? Dave Barry was doing this in at least some emulation of Carl Hiaasen, and that's actually something that he says at the start of his book in his acknowledgement and warning. That is a warning that this book is not for young people. Now, I'm not one to talk about books being for young people because my parents let me watch Monty Python and the Holy Grail when I was 8, so any discussions of things that you shouldn't let young people look at or read is kind of not really a discussion I can partake in. So back to what Dave Barry actually says. He says along the way that Carl Hiaasen is the master of the genre he tried to write in, the bunch of South Florida wackos genre. And after he thanks a whole bunch of authors, including Stephen King, who he personally knows, mainly because he's in a band with Stephen King called the Rock Bottom Remainders. Good luck finding albums if you want to. I'm sure they're available somewhere. So... what is Big Trouble about? Big Trouble is, for those who've never read Carl Hiaasen, I myself would actually be among them, I probably should. Big Trouble is one of those plot lines, like Crash, or like the Christian film, Do You Believe?, where you have a whole bunch of different stories that all collide in a horrific, horrific car wreck by the end of, in this case, the book. So the book is partly the story of Elliot, who is a former journalist who lived the dream of freaking out at his editor and quitting from his job at the paper because his editor was a jerk. And Elliot's various trials and travails of trying to make a living. It's partly the story of Anna Herc, who is married to an abusive jerk who is middle management for, not the mob, but South Florida mob, we'll call it. It's not the actual mob, it's a construction company that basically runs like the mob, so, like, middle management for the mob. He's kind of a fall guy, but not really, and stuff. Anyway, so he's involved in this, his wife is involved in this, her daughter is involved in this, and two guys who are called Snake and Eddie And also there is Nina, who is an illegal Mexican immigrant who just wants to make enough money to bring her family up to the U.S. so they can have a better standard of living. There's Puggy, the homeless guy. There are a lot of people. Um, and first of all, it's Dave Barry, so I needn't point out that it's very, very funny. Um, Notwithstanding Dave Barry turns 50, which frankly I think is probably the least funny thing that he's ever written, and I am including in that the incredibly touching article that he wrote after 9/11. It was a very touching article he wrote after 9/11. Dave Barry turns 50 is less funny than that. Um, I read it all the way through, and I kept hoping it would get better, and it never did. Uh, we also have Elliot's son Matt and Anna's daughter, pardon me, Jenny, and Jenny is not Arthur Herc's daughter. Anna just married him because she was a single mother and in dire financial straits, and Arthur Herc had money. But anyways, reading off of the back, you also have Two Arms Dealing Russian Hoods and the enemy Toad, who is in a constant state of warfare with Roger the dog. Roger the dog, of course, being Anna Herc's pet dog, and he is, as most dogs are, not particularly bright. Can you tell I'm a cat person? So you'll notice I'm just giving you the cast of characters, and the reason why I'm listing off the cast of characters and listing them off in this way, let's not forget Monica, the police officer, and her partner, Officer Kramitz, who is not the brightest spark. He is not the sharpest crayon in the box. Anyways, the thing is that the whole of this book is extremely chaotic, and it's written, and it's meant to be that way. And Dave Barry does an excellent job of bouncing from person to person, from storyline to storyline, and not leaving you confused as to where you are or what's going on, or at least not any more confused than the characters are. You follow Elliot's story all the way through from beginning to end, and you're not confused about it. And Anna Herc and Monica, the police officer, and Nina and Puggy, the homeless guy. Nina is really one of the people that you feel most sorry for in all of this because she's a bystander who's been dragged into things. Monica's job is to be a police officer, so when things get weird, it's still her job to handle it, and Arthur Herc brought it on himself, and Anna is kind of flinging herself headlong into trouble, but Nina's really just been dragged into this sideways, so Nina's kind of the one that I feel most sorry for in all of this. Anyways, I just like the delicate balance of chaos that he achieves in this book. And I like the fact that I love the conversations that people have with each other in this book, including, as an example, when a couple of FBI officers show up and they start throwing their weight around hunting down the illegal weapon that was sold by the two Russian immigrants who have been doing arms running out of a skeezy bar in downtown Miami. That sure, they've shot one of them in the foot. Sure, they're having their back and forth, but one of my favorite fictional tropes comes up. The two people who are on opposite sides who still manage to have a incredibly civil conversation, however brief it may be. In this case, it's the exchange about the FBI officer looking up and saying, "What happened?" he says, nodding at the TV that's been shot through, and Leo, the Russian arms dealer, says, Jerry Springer. Ah, about time. And that's one of my all-time favorite fictional tropes. If you've ever seen the 1994 Shadow movie with Alec Baldwin as the Shadow, it's a master of it really is a masterwork of kitsch. But there's a wonderful little scene where uh, Lamont Cranston, the Shadow, and the villain of the piece, whose name I can never remember for the life of me, they have this wonderful little civilized exchange about where'd you get your suit, Brooks Brothers? No, I'll have to look into it. I've always enjoyed those sorts of exchanges. So Big Trouble doesn't have a lot of those, mainly because so much of this is extremely overwrought. But I think at least part of this does feel very much like Dave Barry's personal impressions of Miami, given that he is a person who is from up north, someplace like Connecticut or something. I don't remember. He's said in various things that he's written where he's actually from, but it's someplace in the northern U.S. and he he has that outsider's view of Miami that just says, "What is happening here?" And the whole book is one long repetition of what is happening here. And I I enjoy that underlying perplexity. I really very much enjoy the fact that he seems to genuinely have the mind of a teenager actually down, unlike some people who seem to forget once they're no longer teenagers what it's like being a teenager. Um, he has the just all of these competing agendas that everybody has in this book, and he handles them all really, really well. And it comes out in the end to a beautiful countdown. There's literally a clock ticking to a bomb explosion at the end of this book, and there's an airplane hijacking, there's a boa constrictor killing a man, there are goats on the highway, there is like I said, a nuclear bomb that's taken off from the airport. There are FBI agents and police officers and a man who's gotten so high from a toad that he thinks that his dog is Elizabeth Dole. And this is all happening at once, and he makes it um I hesitate to say makes sense, but he makes it all work, and he makes it all come into a logical, not necessarily rational, but then again, the human race is genuinely not entirely rational. Um, and it comes together in a really lovely, dovetailed, neat, tying everything, all the ends off, just really, really wonderfully. So, if you're the kind of person who likes these stories of chaos, multiple stories, and convergence, and also, of course, likes Dave Barry style comedy and wacky comedy and that sort of thing, uh, this is a great book. If, however, you don't like chaos or you don't like comedy that can be described as wacky, and I do not include the Three Stooges in wacky. The Three Stooges are so tired and cliched that wackiness doesn't even apply to them anymore. Then, you should probably avoid this book. Um, but anyhow, this is my book of the week. Hopefully, I will have you give you something a little bit more uh, impactful next time. And if you want to go watch the movie and complain about how unlike the book it is, good for you. Have fun, and I hope to see you all next time.